All right. Hi, everybody. Good evening. It is October 21st, shortly after 7:30 p.m. Welcome to the October public meeting of ANC 5D's Zoning and Development Committee. Thank you, everybody, for joining this evening. I think it should be a relatively quiet meeting, like last month's when we were catching up after summer break. So far, there's only 2 items on the agenda. So I think if we want to, I think we can go to Ms. Mana Rabi first. I apologize if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. How do we pronounce your name correctly?
Very close, Mana Rabi, perfect.
Mana Rabi. Okay. So the floor is yours. If you would like to introduce yourself, talk about, I know you were here before the ANC and the zoning committee last year. If you would like to give, for those new members of the committee, if you would like to give some background on what happened last year, how you got here and where you are today and what you are looking for, we would greatly appreciate it.
No, thank you guys very much. Hello to both Kevin and also Commissioner Moore. I had the pleasure of speaking with her and also meeting her in person last year. By way of introduction, my name is Mana Rabi. I'm a roughly 11-year resident of DC. I'm a Reuters journalist, that's my day job. And on the side though, I have a realtor's license and I have an interest in real estate development, but very small scale. I bought a land lot last year in your ANC at the corner of 19th and H, which was sort of awkwardly sized and also very awkwardly proportioned. And back then when the zone was RA2, I had already consulted with zoning attorneys who said that, you're going to have a small house, but you could technically by right through zoning of RA2, put a very small, modest house there. None of us understood, not even my zoning attorneys, that the RF4 zoning was already in play. And I was able to consult with both Commissioner Moore and also Kevin a couple of times by phone, and I think Zoom last year, Kevin, or maybe this year, about what were my options. With all their feedback, I sort of stood back again and sort of took the bigger picture. And I realized that there's a different option altogether that didn't occur to me at all last year when I had first bought the property. By sheer coincidence, my land lot is situated directly in front of, or I should say, yes, my land lot is situated directly in front of the DC Housing Authority lot, one of many they have in that area for subsidized or affordable housing. It's an almost, I believe, 4,000 square foot lot with already established multi-unit apartments. The corner wedge of my land lot meets the weird triangular corner wedge of their land lot at the back. And so what I've done is to propose to DCHA this year, why don't you all sell me that triangular wedge of your corner land lot so that I can combine the 2 triangles and create essentially a more traditional standard elongated rectangle, which both in terms of dimensions and actual sizing and shape is very much like all the other, yes, I can show you my screen too if you like, but there it is. 163 is me. Believe it or not, back in RA2, you could have actually, with maybe just a little bit of exception for a curb cut, put a small house there. With RF4, there's almost nothing you can do there. And so it's essentially wasted land. I'm going to see if I can share my screen. Stand by, please. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to bump you out. Do you all see where I'm pointing to on my left side of the screen? A lot of little funny red triangles? No. Shoot. Stand by. Let's see. Oh, host has disabled participant screen sharing. In that case, let me go back to the page you just opened for us. Apologies. Stand by. Kevin, maybe as the host, could you share that DC zoning map screen again? I apologize. I seem to have clicked out of it, so now I can't even see that. Unless you do see the zoning map.
You're on mute. I'm sorry, Kevin.
Oh, pardon me. I thought I was talking. Thank you. First, let me let in Patrice Lancaster into the panel. There is a feature on Zoom I need to click something that allows people to share. Oh, I need to give Ms. Rebbe as a co-host. Let me
Is that all
promote you
right?
to that.
Yeah, if that's okay with you guys. And I'm
That's
sorry
fine.
about my clumsiness. Technically, as a journalist in DC, we were so-called essential workers. So I've been going to the office. So my experience on Zoom is actually very, very limited. I'm going to click on share
Yes.
screen.
You are now a co-host, so you should be able to share screen.
Super duper. Thank you. I don't mean for these images to look convoluted. Let me see. I realize there are a lot of squiggly lines in here. This green portion is my land lot, and where my cursor is now, if you can see it, is the back of my land lot. It essentially ends at a triangular point. All this here is an almost 4,000 square foot DCHA property, and this building here is one of their many, many affordable housing projects. What I've said to DCHA is if you were to basically sell me this triangular wedge, I don't necessarily need the whole triangle. My architect was maybe being a little generous there, but the point is that in theory, you would be selling me DCHA, the tip of your triangle, so that now I have a more routine rectangle. And from that, my architect has told me that by right, I could have space, especially because I'm a corner lot. So I have the benefit of the third elongated side lot with windows to put in three bedroom, 2-bath units. So they would be genuinely family-sized apartments. So that this is a win-win for everybody. I mean, why would DCHA want to do this? I proposed to them right off at the very top that contractually by covenant, I would commit to developing Section 8 housing so that it would be understood from the very beginning, before even the sale of the disposition is done, that this is only being done on condition that I can deliver 3 Section 8 units. I would love to be able to then, once that happens in the design phase, go back to zoning at some point in the future to say, can I get a variance for maybe 4 units versus the 3 by right? So that's sort of my ambition too, but that's really further down the line. My ask of the Zoning Commission tonight is simply, well, it's great. I didn't realize Commissioner Moore would be here. I initially said with Kevin, if I just can run this by you, because I know I've spoken to Kevin once or twice already about the previous project proposal. What do you think? What do I do next? And so he seemed to have suggested, let's talk to you tonight. And then essentially, if necessary, in more detail, bring it to the broader ANC at large, because technically this project, I don't believe would require any kind of zoning variance. Once DCHA were to sell me that little triangular wedge, the lot is large enough to pretty much get what I want by right. That was my understanding from my architect. With a little nudge here and there. There was a little question about how far back the building restriction, the building would have to go. Is it lot to lot line, or is it some sort of within my lot? Those are little details we can discuss later. I've presented a 10-page document to DCHA way back in June, July. And if any of you are familiar with the DCHA leadership, Alex Morris was a gentleman that I had been speaking to about this project since actually February of this year. So this is a long conversation that's been going on. And by June, July, when I got my architect to sort of visualize for him what I was trying to sort of maybe amateurly describe in emails or in person over the phone, Alex Morris, who's was head of chief of development at DCHA, appeared on board. He said, I agree with you that this is kind of win-win-win for all stakeholders. He said, I see no reason why DCHA would not want to dispose of this small triangular section of their land lot, because if you go and visit the site, it's absolutely disused, unused. It basically sits fallow, it has no curb cut, there's no sidewalk, side capacity there. They're not using it for benches, et cetera, et cetera. It actually ends up being a little corner that sometimes gathers garbage and especially wood debris, like tree debris. Conversely, my lot too is just sitting there essentially fallow. So he seemed to say to me over the phone that I see no reason why DCHA wouldn't want to do this. I'm going to share this, he said, with my legal department and my other development colleagues so that he can loop in additional department heads. He did tell me that I have to be patient, that it's essentially HUD property, I think is what he called it. And so it would take, quote, months for it to go through. And I was really fine with that. Unfortunately, in September, Alex Morris, who was head of development at DCHA, made a sudden departure into the private sector. And so I had to then almost start from the scratch, actually from scratch, because there was no other conversation happening between me and anyone else at DCHA. Thankfully, the new leadership at DCHA, who just started also in the last couple of months, Brenda Donald, was very responsive to me on LinkedIn. I told her what was going on briefly. She said, email me your info. This is what I sent her. And then she said she's sharing this with her legal department. So someone from her department of one of her assistant counsel's lawyers is scheduled to get back to me at DCHA with some sort of feedback or response. I would love it if I can present this to you guys as I am now. Answer any questions, if not tonight, then after you've had a few days or whatever you need to kind of go through this. And like I say, very frankly, get your blessing, because I feel if I could get some feedback from ANC, I can share that with DCHA, including Ms. Donald, including, excuse me, the dog, including the legal department. And to be blunt about it, help cut through maybe through some of the bureaucracy, because I feel, I don't want to complain, but I feel a little like the air has been taken out of me after having nurtured a relationship with DCHA since February, and then sort of unceremoniously to realize in September with Mr. Morris's departure to the private sector that, oh my God, am I going back to scratch from square one? It would be a bit of a shame. I'm already talking to lenders about how can I qualify for essentially a construction loan for creating this housing. I'm already in conversations with getting kind of a formal relationship of mentoring with LEDC, the Latino Economic Development Council, about essentially formalizing this project along with a couple of other projects I have into sort of a women-owned, if I can say as a Middle Eastern Muslim woman, minority-owned business here in DC. How can I kind of incubate through help from LEDC some of my real estate development ambitions in DC? And LEDC knows that a chunk, not in its entirety, but a chunk of my aspirations as a so-called aspiring small-scale developer is to provide affordable housing to DC, because I'm only interested in long-term developments. I am not at all interested in flipping. I'm not even remotely interested in turning these into condos. From the very beginning, as a covenant, told DCHA that I'm happy to basically bake into the project the requirement that these be added to the city's stock of affordable housing. I mentioned that because I also told LEDC I have an interest in providing what we call, this is a totally parenthetical to our conversation, but just by way of sort of knowing who I am, I'm interested in creating co-living housing for people who are underserved. So that could be, for example, singles who don't want to live in a house alone, but who don't qualify for Section 8 vouchers because they're not families. So can I create a co-living, essentially a group home that caters to lower income people who somehow can sort of plug into either affordable housing or actually just cater to whatever their income levels are. I've told LEDC I would love to create a group home for, let's say, transgender youth. By youth, I mean, let's say 18 to about 30, especially in a demographic where maybe they feel estranged from the more conventional LGBT community and are maybe just discriminated against from the larger community of young people in DC who are looking for roommates, et cetera, et cetera. I told LEDC I want to learn how to get licensed in creating a group home for people suffering from or impacted by some level of cognitive impairment. So perhaps a group home dedicated to people who have, let's say, a certain level of autism, but are functioning and yet are discriminated against when they're just out there in what we call the free market looking for roommates. I mentioned that whole story to show you that part of my real estate aspirations, when I'm trying to formulate through the help of LEDC, my real estate career, as I try to transition away from journalism, is that I very much am personally invested in creating housing to the underserved, and that comes in multiple categories. And that's why this seemed like a good fit for everyone, including me. I will benefit from this because one day, essentially, this becomes property that I own and can dispose of in my retirement. I will benefit from this because of the essentially guaranteed rental income that any landlord would like versus running the risk of having vacancies when you're just out in the open market. That's my benefit. I benefit from being able to show a rent roll when I want to go to lenders to acquire additional properties. So this is not altruism. This is a business win-win for me. How is it a win-win for everyone else? I told DCHA in page 1 of the document you see in front of you and have emailed to ANC that essentially this matches your manifesto, or rather your mission, to help curate affordable housing. It absolutely fits into the mayor's overall goals to incrementally increase the affordable housing stock, even if it's just 1 or 2 or 3 units at a time. It certainly fits into the neighborhood because I'm not introducing Section 8 housing to a neighborhood in DC where some neighbors might be up in arms about the very idea. They do that here after all. This is a neighborhood where apparently maybe up to 1/3 of the tenants are renters in the single family homes. It's literally at the corner of where a large swath of rental housing, multi-unit rental housing, meets another large swath of single family homes. And so it felt like an interesting transition building that anchors between that half and this half. I do know for a fact that the adjacent property at 1959 has been rental property for a while. I can't think of anything that essentially says this is a bad idea.
Okay.
And I've told DCHA, oh yes.
So I would like to give some of the commissioners who are on, I appreciate all the background, that is very helpful. I'm going to share my screen for a second, and I'm going to open the floor for the commissioners and other zoning committee members to answer their question. I'm going to share my desktop only because what I'm doing, I'm zooming in a little more detail. Can you see my screen here? Let's see if this actually works. Didn't work. I'm trying to share my desktop. I'm not sure it's working. Can you guys see my desktop?
You're showing the plan, right?
I
Yeah.
have a question.
Yeah,
just a quick one, please.
Yes, go ahead.
Anytime you try to develop or purchase lots and try to create affordable housing,
I think you're on mute. We can't hear you.
like, why didn't you purchase existing properties as opposed to necessarily just empty lots?
Fair question. Oh, I'm sorry. Am I waiting for someone else to say something? Oh, I'm looking at the wrong person. Forgive me. Yes, fair question. I bought this land lot because it was frankly cheap. I found it. I had been looking for property to purchase. And during COVID, like a lot of people, I was clicking by, I guess, coincidence. I don't know. I found this lot. It was affordable. I frankly wasn't even familiar with this neighborhood before I bought it. It was very affordably priced at less than $20,000. The owners were themselves realtors and developers. Why they wanted to get rid of it, I don't know. I asked them, they told me to go do your own due diligence. It turned out that years ago in maybe 2012, they had gone to the zoning or BZA for relief because, now I remember, they wanted to create a really big house on a very small lot. And they wanted 3 variances or something, or relief from 3 things. And so the BZA said no. I found no additional, or I didn't readily find any additional history on that land lot. But I then consulted with zoning attorneys and said, hey, can I create a small house? Can I create a really small home, like on a very small footprint, so that if I were to excavate and then go up 2 stories, can I create a cute 2 or 3 bedroom house for myself? They said yes. Unfortunately, is that it? I don't think so.
So I guess I just want to interject here about some of the history of the lot, which just isn't correct. The case was originally for a townhome, not dissimilar from the townhomes that are currently there. There were 2 previous cases, both denied for very similar reasons to the issues that I see in this proposal which are just kind of basic zoning requirements, even under RA2, which is that the basic width of the building for someone to live in just isn't met unless there's the addition of additional property, in addition to some of the zoning requirements. So I think that's the first problem here, which is why they, sold the property after not being able to successfully get the BZA to approve those exemptions. They would have needed 3 different exemptions just to build a basic townhome there. And the original proposal this time around was not for a small townhome. It was for a multi-unit building on that property, which, for a variety of kind of really obvious reasons, the community wouldn't support. And so I guess my very basic question is, without the additional property, which is zoned differently and historic from DC Housing Authority, there's not a strong possibility here of really building anything. And if my question is, what is it that you're trying to get done? Are you asking us right now at this point to give a letter in support of the sale of that property to you? Or is it, what is the goal, ideally for you from tonight's meeting?
Yes, can I address the 2 previous things too? My lot is 19 feet across. And
you need a 4-foot side setback, which would make it less than the minimum.
I think, here's the question. I remember speaking with you last year, and the only issue is that when I go to the zoning attorneys and also my architect who's with the Michael Cross team, they seem to say that some of that feedback possibly might be either maybe not outright incorrect, but they seem to have a different opinion. So I'm for now going by the what I have to take at face value for the time being, the knowledge base or expertise of both the zoning attorney and also the architect. Both companies are accustomed to going to the BZA
and I would encourage them to review the previous case, which both were denied for exactly the reason I just described.
Yes, but I only knew of, oh, you mean my case?
No, I mean both of the previous cases on that same exact lot that you purchased.
I recall one, but I don't doubt there was a second. What I was told by both parties, the zoning attorney and Michael Cross, the architect, was that there's been since then a lot of development in the almost 10 years, really, since that last one that I recall seeing from 2012. And that with the recent development and the, what's that word? I'm blanking on precedence, I guess is the word, that actually things have changed since then. But let me just go by what the architect and the zoning attorneys were telling me for the time being. To answer your question again, the lot there is 19 feet across. And I thought that considering you do see houses that are built on even 15-foot lots, that at least from a starting base, a starting point, that didn't seem to be an impossibility to say that I want to build on something that's 19 feet across. I did go to obviously I presented my case over, and you're right, Ms. Commissioner, Commissioner Moore, I did ask, is it possible? Well, I wasn't quite asking last year, can I build the 3 units? I was hoping to defend against the RF4, because when I came into the picture to meet with you guys, it was actually to say, I'm one of those stakeholders who would rather not see the transition from RA2 to RF4. So I didn't mean for my presentation last year to be any kind of a formal application. Otherwise, I would have done a little bit more due diligence. I would have attended the meeting with a zoning attorney or my architect to present my interests for sure. I was basically there as a stakeholder to say at the level of a citizen that I'm one of those people who wants to, before the zoning change is committed, to voice my what's the word? Um, protest to that zone change.
Sure,
And
I understand what you're saying
have-
now, but that just isn't an accurate statement in regards to what I was specifically told from you, which was that, you know, you had intended to build 3 units and live in one of them.
Yes, I apologize.
Yeah.
Let me say why I guess I'm jumping from one thing to another. In order to qualify for an affordable construction loan, I knew that I would have to basically move in, you're right, see if I can make very small units, 3 by right, to live in one, like in the basement, and then live in the other 2. And I apologize because I'm forgetting a couple of things. With my designer, I actually initially started talking with him about, can I put a single family home there for myself? When we saw that it was actually RA2 and, oh, you can do 3 units, then I expanded the conversation. And you're correct in remembering this more accurately than I am. I went to both you and I think Kevin about, can I do, I want to do 3 units, but on the I think I was asking for the RA2 treatment versus RF4. At any rate, it was kind of a close-ended conversation because you're right to say that under RF4, that would have been essentially an impossibility.
It would have been an impossibility under RA2, but I guess the question that I have is simply, what is the ask for this evening?
To ask for this.
And Mana,
Yes.
let me just interject something. Why your architects may tell you you could build up to the full 19 feet, because you know there's a lot of things happened in the past, and I hope we just focus on what we can do for the future. There used to be a side yard requirement in DC that you needed to have. I forget what it was, 3 or 5 feet, which meant anytime there was an undeveloped lot, which was at the edge of a row of houses, it would require the developer to go get a special exception. I know there was a zoning commission case where they removed that for RF1. And there's a possibility that because RF4 is so new, they may not have gotten rid of that. But even if they have not yet gotten rid of that, that is a relatively, I would say, an easy zoning relief to get. So I think it is fair to say that if you did own this, and hopefully, is my screen still showing here?
Yes.
I think it is relatively, I think you can say you could most likely end up building up to the full 19 feet. It may require a very minor special exception to the zoning regulation. That's assuming they haven't adopted the same side yard setback requirements that is on RF1. What I am looking at this and what I'm concerned about a little bit is, you know, you have your neighbor next door and you're not just going straight back to create a better rectangular lot. You're actually kind of encroaching over here. And I could imagine this being perceived as not positive to your next door neighbor. And although it is a rental house, I could imagine that they might oppose that because it's like, you know, there's someone who has owned in the community for a while.
Yeah.
Is there
So
a version of?
I want to press pause on the new question and then ask for an answer on my previous question, which was, what is the ask for tonight's meeting?
Thank you. The ask really is to present this proposal so that you're in the loop on what I've given to DCHA, and then to essentially get your feedback about the creation of the 3 units, family size 3 bedrooms. You'll see in the 10-page proposal that the architect is sort of showing on some other pages that this is not the draft of my project. This is just a random 3-bedroom Section 8 housing project that he did on a rather modest footprint to show me that it is possible to put a full 3 bedrooms into a single floor on a modest footprint. And I shared this with DCHA simply as a point of reference. It's not at all dimensionally accurate to my lot. But again, to finally answer your question, I'd love for you guys to review this and then give me a chance to answer any questions that might also linger into next week or whenever. And essentially then say, if broadly speaking, with a broad brush stroke, with no actual commitments, like set in stone commitments, if this seems like a good project for the community, as I believe it does, as Mr. Morris at DCHA believed it does, I'd love some sort of language from ANC, because as we all know, taking that language of general approval general, I'm on board with this. On the surface, it seems like a good thing for our neighborhood. To take that language to DCHA would help sort of facilitate some speed into my conversations with DCHA. It's possible that I wouldn't even be doing this if Mr. Alex hadn't left, because our conversations were moving forward until that time when DCHA were to say, hey, remember, we also want you to have some ANC feedback. But
So-
because,
So, Mr. Reed, you're asking people to judge a concept when the plans you've shown, this is a 27-foot wide lot here.
no,
This
you're
ba-
right.
This bears absolutely no relevance to even the lot, even if you were to go back here. See, I don't even think the zoning committee could do any analysis to present to Commissioner Moore, or to the other commissioners. We can't even judge this. It's hard to know, like, would 3 units be great here, or would it be horrendous here? Would it really be 3 family-sized units?
Yeah, maybe it was a mistake to put the architect's drawings from another project. It was really there. And again, I feel like I wasn't quite prepared for tonight because Kevin, you were nice enough to tell me about tonight's meeting. So I kind of scrambled to just send your zoning email, this document that I had ready. I otherwise didn't have anything else ready. This was truly just meant to be a placeholder. And I believe on page 1 of the document, when I was sending this collectively as one PDF to DCHA, I think I made it clear either in the letter or in the email that attached this letter that, hey, this is just sort of a placeholder that the architect shared with me when he was trying to illustrate for me how, yes, Mana, you can squeeze, and we used the word squeeze, 3-bedroom, 2 baths into a relatively modest footprint, square foot footprint. But again, with the benefit of that 3 open views, in his opinion, and this is Michael Cross, who routinely is in front of the BZA for both luxury, but also large multi-unit and also smaller Section 8 multi-unit projects. Again, his expertise has told me that we can do this. He thought you could generally do it from a zoning perspective. He believed you could generally do it from a building perspective. I would like to address that wedge, that little wedge in the back that you say does sort of impose into not the other neighbor's lot. It's actually still the DCHA lot. That neighbor actually has 2 encroachments on my lot and their lot, including, I don't want to bore you with the details, but a fence encroachment and also these large AC units that are on my land lot. What's interesting about that little triangular wedge that, let me point to, well, you can't see my point, is that I could actually essentially tell the neighbor, I'm not going to impose on you to move your ACs, which would include a lot of plumbing stuff, onto your property, especially because she hardly has any kind of a backyard. Why don't we just do one of those easement thingies? Sorry, thingies is not a technical term. Give her essentially an easement where she can put her ACs in perpetuity on that corner wedge.
Why wouldn't she, if you're going to negotiate something where DC Housing Authority is going to sell some lots, to me, it would make sense that both of you get rectangular lots. And yes, an easement would allow her the use, but it's kind of weird. I mean, I just could imagine that neighbor being very opposed to you kind of making her lot a bit of a landlocked. I see a lot of benefit for you. There is a risk that, and we'd have to speak with DC Housing Authority, how would you buying this lot perhaps limit their ability to develop? Because I see there's a building, their building goes right here. Is it possible that they might have had a future building to expand this existing public housing unit, and maybe this would have been used as egress or an alley for trash or something? So I think there's a lot of things.
I want to interject here to add very briefly to what you're saying, Kevin, is that I know that there are construction and planning activities going on for that site. But that's just a short interjection. Don't mean to interrupt your train of thought.
True, but my understanding was that because they're actually, the buildings themselves are historic, even though this area isn't broadly historic, that there would be a limitation into the scope of the changes they would do. This seems to show 21 and H, so I'm not sure it's the right street. It may be that Google Zoom made a little mistake here. It's showing Maybe
Yeah,
I have
no,
the act-
21 and H is correct.
Oh, sorry.
I think this is the right building here, right? You're 1961.
Yeah, forgive
Yeah.
me, I lost my bearings because I kept looking for that
Okay.
triangle.
Yeah,
Kevin,
you
you
can kind of
asked about,
you can kind of see it here, and I'm just going to jump in on the street view so those watching at home can see how I do this. Let me zoom in here so I get street view. There we go. There's a little tree here. I will say this doesn't look overgrown and fallow. This looks like kind of an unused green space. And this is the existing public housing building here. And I think the lot lines for further down go to about here.
right. I've been there at times because I obviously visit my lot frequently or every now and then. You often do see, at least when I check, it could have been removed, huge pieces of trees and trunks and things like that that are kind of left at the edges of that fence. And that fence is an encroachment for the time being on both my lot and the DCHA lot. To Kevin's issue about why not create a vertical rectangle for both properties, mine and the neighbor, I'm quite happy about that. I understood from some people I inquired regarding what would be entailed in moving the neighbor's AC unit off of my property where it's an encroachment onto her property. She's actually got so little space in the back that it would be expensive to move it to her property. That's why I thought just giving her an easement there would be the cheaper option for her. I have no personal difference whatsoever actually on whether I keep that awkward triangle or we just sort of benefit both properties, mine and hers, by making both a rectangle. I'm really okay with it.
So I guess my question here is that is she on board with that? Have you spoken with her?
You know, here's the other issue that I wanted some help from DCHA, which is why having any kind of feedback from you would be a nice nudge for me to DCHA. DCHA, I've been trying to tell them, and Mr. Alex Morris knew about the encroachment that she's creating. She has ignored, unfortunately, 2 rather expensive legal letters I had to pay attorneys to send her notice of the encroachments, to please stop the encroachments, outright ignored them. And they were sent to, I believe, both the rental property, but also her primary residence, which I believe is like K Street Northwest in a condo. I was maybe a little shy about just calling her up and sort of seeing what's up, you're ignoring my letters. Because I don't want to be overly confrontational. I didn't know quite how to broach the subject. I was told by the attorneys and then other attorneys that I consulted with about what can I do next, that by ignoring the letters, and they were like, DHL, FedEx, formal letters that she would have signed for, by ignoring both letters, which were sent a couple of months apart, she's essentially deliberately sending sort of a negative message to me that I don't care about these encroachments. And that's how I was advised by my lawyers. And I just felt like I'm a little maybe shy about tiptoeing forward on my own with her, to be honest.
I think maybe having approached her with a phone call first might have, been a little bit of a less aggressive move, just to be frank. I've looked her up before when there have been issues, given her a call, and she's been responsive. So I think maybe the approach was not, necessarily the best approach. What I will say is that typically we don't involve ourselves as the ANC, though, in legal disputes with neighbors.
I understand.
We would be doing that all day, every day on all of the days. But I do take your request about, interacting with DCHA seriously. I think that that's an appropriate request for the ANC.
Great.
I think the issue there, I don't know. I think the issue there is that you really haven't given us anything to go on. I mean, there's just nothing here for us to actually review other than just some musings. And I think even the letter from the design professionals ends with a sentence basically saying, I gave this a cursory glance and didn't do my research around these issues, but this is what I gather from a quick look. And I can do more in-depth analysis. So it just kind of
Oh, I seem to have lost your audio.
Yeah, I lost the audio as well. Commissioner Moore, you've gone to mute, seems.
oh, sorry. I keep losing my audio here. I think it's a bad
You're
one.
back. You're back now.
Okay. But I just think there's not enough here for us to review. So in general, I'm not against the idea of putting some housing on this lot. I think what is, frankly, not great for me is just kind of there's a foggy understanding around some of the zoning. There's not clear plans for what would be done there. It doesn't seem clear at this point whether DCHA is still interested in making that arrangement, or whether the arrangement would even be necessarily a good enough deal to make it a public benefit for the community at large, because 10 years versus in perpetuity doesn't really strike the balance. So I guess what I'm looking for is, if you're wanting a letter of support from us as a commission, then we have to see something concrete about what you're actually planning to do moving forward in order to give you that type of feedback.
Super, thank you. And I didn't mean to just sort of dump this. It was really more of a sort of a last minute placeholder because I had nothing else to kind of help visualize. But I'm certainly happy to go back to the architect and the zoning attorney to say, why don't we come up with a more, as you say, concrete, detailed assessment with no questions as well. I suppose there's always a question somewhere, but something more concrete. Alex Morris at DCHA felt like this was at least enough of a start to sort of present the general idea. I'll tell you why, because and I realize this has had nothing to do with you guys, but after all, quite a lot of money goes into just getting here, especially because I'm not technically a professional developer. I'm a TV reporter for Reuters who wants to do this on the side. And so I'm in some ways a little cautious about committing a lot of funds up front for something when all I'm trying to say is, in theory, does this seem suitable? Once they were to say, oh yes, in theory, if you show me something that's feasible too, we're okay with this. For example, I have no idea at what price point they would want to sell that lot. If we can't come to an agreement on that, then all of this effort and money would have been wasted. So, Commissioner, I just meant to say that's why I think possibly with both the zoning attorneys and also the architects, it was understood that we're just kind of giving Mana a preliminary assessment because she's trying to get a broad sense of whether this is possible. And then I sent this to DCHA to essentially just tell them, in theory, if this pans out the way we think it might, does this feel good to you too? Forgive the metaphor. It's almost as if to say, do you want to go on a first date with me before we talk about moving in together? I mean, that's almost like that. If they don't even want to go on a first date, why should I even propose renting an apartment? Forgive the metaphor, but that's kind of what I was thinking when I was preparing this for DCHA. But yeah, I'd love to present some detailed information and bring it to you as soon as I can. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a quick question, which is, if you did purchase this section of land, and I will say, by the way, I think you're going to give a lot of people a lot of heartburn crossing over into this area. I would just tell you, just go straight back. I do think, let me see if I can bring up the plans here. I think you'd probably cause less heartburn if you just went straight back. Now, yes, you're leaving a sliver here. Leave that up to this owner here, and someday in the future, leave it up to them if they want to purchase that up, housing authority. I think by doing this weird thing here, I think you're going to invite a fight from the neighbor next door. And I think, but getting back, my question is, if you do end up doing this lot here, you now have a lot which has split zoning. It is both RF2 and RF4 and RA2. And on occasion, there are cases before the ANC where a developer, it's happened recently at 1801 Maryland Ave, where there was a legal lot and the boundary between RA2, or I think maybe it was MU7 and MU5 or something, was going to the middle of the lot. And they were asking for zoning relief based upon the higher lot occupancy.
Mhm.
If you did do this, I think the ANC is going to want to have a commitment from you that you would abide by RF4 zoning regulations and not RA2.
Yeah, that seems completely fair.
Yeah, and that's definitely the case. I can just say that now. And then the other issue, which is related, is that the RA2 portion is also designated historic. So then you're inviting another issue there in terms of, what regulations you need to follow for construction on the lot.
Yes, I was advised by the Michael Cross group, Michael Cross himself, that the building is historic, even if the land isn't, but that's a subtle point, and that the project would have some additional scrutiny, but not quite at the level of as if I were doing any kind of construction on an actual historic district. But you're right. The very historic nature, not only in terms of zoning assignment, but historically, culturally of that building, I agree with you. And I know that it's too early to even discuss aesthetics, but my intention, and again, I'm happy to include this as a covenant, if I'm using the right term, as a way to essentially codify into law or into contractual agreements my intentions. I did wish to design something that aesthetically would blend with those other row houses. So that it's not some garish pop-up made of all, glass or something, especially in the front, where it would have to have a sense of continuity with the adjacent row houses.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense. And I actually would say it's not too early to be discussing aesthetics. I think we're right at the point where, if you're asking us for any type of support with any agency, there just has to be more there. And there just has to be kind of a very clear understanding of what it is you're trying to do, how it relates to zoning, how it would relate to potential zoning, were you to actually get the property that you're trying to get. So there's just not anything for us to really vote on at this point, just because we don't have anything in front of us to look at. I mean, and I think it's worth noting, because I think people, especially newer coming into developing properties, there are plenty of occasions where a design professional presents designs, or even DCRA approves designs, only to find out later that they're, incorrect under the zoning. And so I think you've got to be, very careful, and a little bit more skeptical about sort of, how you're moving forward in terms of the design, and just having the awareness that, it's not just kind of someone puts it down on paper and they have the right degrees and it's all approved. It does go through a review process.
Oh, for sure. And once again, I didn't really mean at all for either for a vote to happen tonight, or for this to be the final information. I really was just scrambling today to send something as a kind of a placeholder to help visualize what I wanted. This page that you see now on Kevin's screen is really, for me, the most important one. The other stuff, especially the layout of the architectural drawing, was truly just meant to be a placeholder for DCHA. And I'm happy to come back with as you say, a floor plan, as it were, of what a real 3-bedroom would look like on that proposed, now we would call it rectangle, so that I'm getting rid of that unusual triangle per Kevin's maybe suggestion.
Yeah.
All right, now I do want to move. We had one other item on tonight's agenda, and I don't see her having joined. One of our neighbors, Grace, had a question about a development underway at 1614 Montello.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mona. If you're welcome to stay, or you can, I just reached out
Oh,
to.
it would be fun. I'll just watch. Thank you.
Sure. So, Commissioner Moore, there was a neighbor reached out to Commissioner Saucedo Guzman about a project underway at 1614 Montello. And let me see if I can find. Sorry. And apparently there's a bunch of construction underway and there's multiple stop works. And I just read the email today. Look, sorry, I'm trying to read an email that was sent to me. I'm just going to repeat what was sent to us. Good morning. The property at 1614 Montello Ave Northeast has continued to work against stop work orders. General contractor IFG and the owner have continuously ignored orders in place because of non-compliance and failure to obtain proper permits for the work they sought to do. They've continued working by hiring different contractors every other week. As before, they've taken down stop work signs. It was placed by several DCR inspectors. I'm just trying to paraphrase here. Their continued work has damaged my home at 1616 Montello Ave Northeast because of their sidestepping from not framing our shared wall, leaving it open, exposed to the elements. We also had issues with birds and squirrels because of it being left open and exposed. Leaving my roof open caused damage to my roof. So this sounds like a nightmare. And they have cracking to foundation, impeding on my property line, causing my front porch to collapse. Jesus. All right, this sounds like a bit of a nightmare.
I mean, this isn't even the only one of these we're having right now, unfortunately. So I do have some advice if that's what they're looking for in terms of who to contact about the issue.
Yeah, and they reached out to me. I did send them the webinar link earlier today to register, and I just sent them an email right now to see if they were joining us because we will be wrapping up soon. But let me see if I can. I mean, I'm sure they would. So, Commissioner, I think we may need to follow up offline with our neighbor Grace to see, how we can help her. I mean, what are your? I mean, this sounds.
We have a few of these right now, and this is really something for the Consumer Protection Division. At DCRA. So I would say the first thing to do is to call the Consumer Protection Division at DCRA to make them aware, especially of any issues, regarding encroachment onto the neighboring property. And then to reach out to Keaton Cooper, who's the new head of illegal construction. And it's not Quentin, but it's spelled like Quentin, but with no N, Keaton.
Head of illegal construction.
Yeah.
All right. And what I'll do is I might give a walk by myself tomorrow, sometime this weekend, just to have a look myself, and we'll reach out to Grace just so she knows we're on this. I sometimes find just when the developer knows that there's a lot of eyeballs from the ANC, because it's not uncommon when developers will do multiple projects in the neighborhood, and they may not want to get on your bad side, Commissioner Moore. So we'll follow up with Grace. Again, I don't see her in our panel here. So, but we will follow up with her offline.
Hi, this is Patrice Lancaster.
Hi.
If you could give me her contact information as well. I don't. This is my first time hearing about this, but it's around the corner from where I live. And I also know how to navigate DCRA as well, and know some of the personnel, because I've actually seen some of the DCRA personnel as late as this summer at that property, dealing with people that were doing construction when they weren't supposed to be. So
Yeah. So they're actually, my own house is under, I'm doing a renovation around my own house, and they actually stopped in just to check to make sure we had our permits.
Right.
And, you know, like, and we weren't doing anything wrong, and they popped in and they just wanted to be sure that all our Ts were crossed and Is and dotted. So they're going around and just checking sites. But if, yeah, so we might just need to get some more, if they are violated, I mean, there's some pretty significant fines. If they put a stop work
Yeah,
order
they
on
are.
your house and you continue working, that's not a good thing to do, because then they get punitive, and they'll be back a lot more frequently. So, but yeah, Patrice, if you can, I don't have your email address.
I put it in the chat.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, there. You know what? I think I do have it. I just
Yeah, I heard from you before.
got it.
Meeting and
Okay. Thanks.
All right. Okay, well, I think, I think this is a good wrapping up point, unless, does anyone have any other concerns, thoughts to raise for this month's meeting, Commissioner Moore, or any of the other members?
Sure. No, the only thing I was gonna add is that I will reach out to Commissioner Salcedo Guzman
Okay,
to make sure that he's aware of that issue as well. And thanks so much to you, Patrice, for stepping up to help out a neighbor. Very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Mhm.
and I'm going to CC you on an email back to Grace and CCing Commissioner Salcedo Guzman. So just putting in writing real quick the commentary, the advice you just suggested, and we should follow up with her directly so we can chat with her on the phone and see how we can help her. So I think that wraps up the October zoning committee meeting. Thanks everybody for attending. Oh, by the way, I should say there was some comments that Derek had given in the chat log, and Derek, I completely agree with you. Derek had written earlier about, he said, quote, "I recognize that you don't have a great parcel of land to build on. I do think this is a comment to Ms. Rabi. I do think that if you acquire more land, that will change how you can make your case. Otherwise, there's nothing we can do. Our job is not to provide not what makes sense in terms of purchase or legal issues, only in zoning issues." And he's completely correct. Like, these types of things become very emotional. And even when you go before the BZA, it is very strictly, what can you do as a matter of right? What special exceptions? So I think right now we are just very limited. What you're asking us to give you advice on something. And I think we'd almost be afraid of saying, yeah, we'd support this. And then if you bought this land and went to the BZA, and if they didn't do it, we'd be afraid of being somehow liable or something. Like, there is some sort of, like, you might have to take a leap of faith, but I do think it would be helpful to have more fleshed out plans. Maybe there's an architecture student, in the neighborhood who can do some affordable concepts for you. What would that be?
Thank you. And yes, I did not mean for you guys to give me legal advice. I even didn't think that I was at the zoning stage. It was really just, this was the place I thought I could first go to kind of get the ball rolling on getting some general feedback from ANC, which I really appreciate your feedback, all of you today.
Okay. All right. Well, look, I'll wrap this up. Thank you so much, everybody.
Same, thank you. Bye.
Bye. Be safe, everybody. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Cheers.